1. Identify your spending triggers, then remove them. You know the feeling when something shifts. Work was rough. It's a dull Sunday. Someone stressed you out. And 10 minutes later, you're on your phone, scrolling, adding things to a cart. Not because you needed any of it, just because it felt like relief. That feeling, that's your trigger. And everyone who overspends has them. They just look different. Stress for some people, boredom for others, celebration, loneliness, even just being around friends who are spending. All of it counts. Here's where minimalism parts ways with regular budgeting advice. It doesn't start with a spreadsheet. It starts with one question. What's happening right before I spend money I didn't plan to spend? Once you notice your triggers, you can start reshaping your environment to make overspending harder. If you always overspend at a particular store, stop going there. A friend you love that always turns hangouts into shopping trips? Keep the friend, change the plan. So before you try to build a budget, before you track a single dollar, just figure out what's been pulling the trigger. Once you know that, everything else becomes a lot easier. And once you start looking at why you spend, you're going to notice something a little uncomfortable. That's what Rule 2 is about. 2. Stop defining yourself by what you own. When you start watching your triggers, a pattern shows up. A lot of spending isn't really about the thing you're buying. It's about who you want to seem like, or who you want other people to think you are. We buy clothes to look successful, cars to look like we've made it. We upgrade things that work fine because we don't want anyone to think we're struggling. We buy rounds of drinks to seem generous. It's all identity. And here's the trap. You can never buy your way to feeling secure in who you are. There's always a newer phone, a nicer place, someone who seems to have more. If your self-worth is tied to what you own, you're on a treadmill that never stops. What minimalism asks is simple. Separate yourself from your stuff. You're not your car, not your wardrobe, and not your neighborhood. Those are objects, and they don't make you more interesting. They don't make people care about you more. They definitely don't make you financially stable. Think about the people in your life that you actually admire. I'd bet it's not because of what they own. It's probably because of something else. How they treat people, how they think, and what they're about. None of that has a price tag. When you start to really believe that, the need of a lot of purchases just quietly fades. You stop buying things to perform for other people, and that one shift alone frees up real money every month. Now, the stuff around you in your home is also doing something to your brain, something most people don't notice. That's Rule 3. 3. Own less, want less. Walk into a cluttered room. Notice how you feel. There's usually a low-grade sense of overwhelm. Your eyes don't know where to land. There's noise even when it's quiet. And often, this quiet, restless feeling of wanting, like something needs to be fixed, or filled, or bought. That's not random. Clutter makes people more anxious, more restless, and more likely to spend. Research backs this. People in cluttered spaces make worse financial decisions. They reach for comfort more often, and buying things is one of the fastest ways people comfort themselves. Here's what sounds strange until you try it. When you own less, you want less. Not because you're suffering, but because your baseline resets. A calm, clear home actually makes you feel calmer and clearer. That constant hum of dissatisfaction starts to quiet down. This week, pick one spot, either a drawer or one cabinet. Clear out what you don't use and don't need. Then just notice how that space feels. Most people feel lighter, and they start actually appreciating what they already have because they can finally see it. Now let's talk about where your money actually goes when you spend it, because this is where a lot of overspenders go wrong. 4. Spend on experiences, not things. I know, this sounds like a poster on a coffee shop wall. Stay with me, because the psychology behind it is genuinely useful for people who overspend. Here's what happens with almost everything you buy when you get it. There's a rush. You enjoy it for a bit. Then pretty quickly, it's just another thing in your life. The novelty fades and you stop noticing it, and the itch for something new starts up again. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. Your brain always drifts back to baseline, every time, no matter what you buy. Experiences don't work that way. A good trip, a meal with people you love, a concert, or a weekend away, those things grow in your memory. You live to tell the stories about the experiences. It becomes part of you in a way another purchase never will. So this isn't about spending less. It's about spending on things that actually last. 5. The 72-hour rule before every non-essential purchase. Before you buy anything that isn't food, rent, bills, or medicine, wait 72 hours, or 3 days. That's it. Here's why it works. The moment you see something you want, your brain releases dopamine. tied to excitement, anticipation, and reward. But most of that hit comes from the wanting, not the having. The craving itself feels almost as good as getting the thing. So by the time you actually own it, the excitement has already peaked. It's already going away. Impulse buying is acting on that peak before it settles. The 72-hour rule just lets the wave pass. After 3 days, ask yourself, do I still want this? What was I feeling when I first saw it? Most of the time, the desire is mostly gone. Sometimes it vanishes completely. And occasionally, you'll still genuinely want it. In this case, buy it, because that's not an impulse. That's a real want. 6. One account for needs and another one for wants. Have you ever tried a detailed budget? Dining slot, entertainment, clothes, transport. It works for maybe 2 weeks. Then it falls apart because it's exhausting to maintain. There's a name for this. Decision fatigue. Every choice you make through the day costs a little mental energy. By evening, that energy's low. That's exactly when most overspending happens. Late, tired, scrolling, willpower basically empty. The minimalist system doesn't track every dollar in 20 categories. It uses 2 accounts. Account 1 is for needs like rent, food, transport, or insurance. Anything that keeps your life running. Account 2, wants. This includes eating out, clothes, or hobbies. When paycheck comes in, you split it. Needs account gets the fixed costs. The rest, after savings, goes to wants. 7. Set a spending ceiling, not just a limit. Here's a situation most people run into. You need running shoes and you don't want to spend much. But once you start looking, things slowly change. The cheaper pair might not last very long. The next one has mixed reviews. Then you see a nicer pair that costs a bit more, but it looks better, feels better, and will probably last longer. So you keep moving up the price range. And before you realize it, you've spent twice what you originally planned. This happens because of something called maximizing. In simple terms, it's the habit of always searching for the absolute best option. It sounds like a smart way to shop, but in reality, it often leads to spending more than you intended. That's because there's always a better version waiting just a little further up the price range. Instead, there's a simpler approach. Before you even start looking, decide what good enough looks like. In other words, set a spending ceiling. Do this before you open the shopping app and before you walk into the store. Decide your number ahead of time. Maybe it's $50 for shoes. Whatever the number is, that becomes your ceiling. After that, you only look at options within that range. Anything above your ceiling simply isn't considered. This works because the hardest decision has already been made. You're no longer comparing more and more expensive options. Instead, you're just choosing the best option within your range. And the truth is, good enough usually works perfectly well, but the shoes within your budget will still do their job. 8. Automate your savings. Most people save whatever is left at the end of the month. The problem is, especially for people who tend to overspend, there usually isn't much left, because even if income goes up, lifestyle usually rises with it. So if you're waiting until the end of the month to save, chances are you're not saving very much. A better approach is to flip the order. Save first, before wants, before anything optional. The moment money comes in, a portion of it should move straight into savings automatically, so you never see it sitting in your spending account. This idea is called paying yourself first, and it works not because you suddenly became more disciplined, but because the decision is already made before you even log in to your bank account. There's nothing to resist and nothing to feel guilty about. It simply happens in the background. So set up an automatic transfer. Even if you need to start small, that's completely fine. Even 5% works. The exact amount matters less than the habit itself. What you're really building is consistency. You're teaching yourself that saving happens first. Then, as your situation improves, you can slowly increase the percentage over time. There's one more small trick that helps a lot. Keep your savings in a separate bank from the one you use for everyday spending. It shouldn't be impossible to access, but it also shouldn't be instant. That small bit of friction makes you pause and think before touching it. Over time, it starts to feel like that money isn't really yours to spend anymore, because in a way, it isn't. That money belongs to your future self. And once saving starts happening automatically, the next step is learning how to spend less overall while actually improving the things you own. 9. Buy quality once instead of cheap twice. Imagine you need a kitchen knife and you don't want to spend much, so you buy a cheap one for $10. It works for a few months, but then it goes blunt and becomes frustrating to use. So eventually, you replace it then, after a while, you replace it again. 5 years later, you've spent $50 on several bad knives, and you still don't have one you actually enjoy using. Now compare that with buying one decent knife for $35. It lasts for years, works better, and you don't have to keep replacing it. In the end, you spend less money, make fewer decisions, and have a better experience every time you use it. That's the real idea here. It's not about buying the most expensive version of everything. It's about choosing things that last, so you don't get stuck in repeat purchase cycles that slowly drain your money. So the key is knowing where quality actually matters in your life. If you work from home all day, a good chair is worth it. If you cook most of your meals, good pans are worth it. If you walk a lot, comfortable shoes matter. These are the areas where quality can genuinely improve your daily life. But for many other things, simple is perfectly fine. You don't need premium dish soap. You don't need 5 different kinds of conditioner. So the goal is to identify where an upgrade truly makes a difference. Spend a little more there, and keep everything else simple. And something interesting happens when you start doing this. When you own fewer, better things, you naturally stop browsing and buying out of habit. You stop accumulating clutter that makes your space feel crowded and stressful, which often leads people to spend even more, trying to fix that feeling. In other words, all of these rules start working together, and they all lead to the final principle on this list. 10. Define what enough looks like for your life. When there's no finish line, spending stays open-ended. There's always something else to want, always another upgrade, always someone who seems to have more. So the goalposts keep moving, and you keep spending. Not because you're working towards something clear, but because nothing is telling you when to stop. That's why defining your own version of enough matters. It means drawing the line for yourself, based on your values and the kind of life you actually want to live. Not what looks impressive, not what your family expects, and not what society says you should want. So it's worth asking yourself this: what kind of life, if you actually had it, would make you feel like you're no longer chasing? Not what looks good from the outside, but what would genuinely feel like enough for you. Once you know that, every financial decision becomes clearer.